podcast between Fetch.ai and Secret Network, and I'd love to kind of start off with a short introduction. So, my name is Nico. You've probably heard my voice quite a lot, but this is likely the first time you're seeing me. I've been hosting the various podcasts that we've been holding through the Fetch.ai account, and beyond that, I'm a community manager and DevRel, and more recently, kind of started acting as a little bit of a co-lead of the ASI Alliance. And Alex, feel free to kind of lead in with an introduction about yourself, then Lisa, and then Hamaya.
Sure. Thanks, Nico. First of all, happy to be here. It's a great opportunity to share what we're doing and share our joint plans. My name is Alex. I'm CEO of Secret Labs, which is the engineering body of the Secret Network. Big fan of privacy. I started my journey in crypto in 2017-18 with a privacy coin project and was interested in privacy and DeFi and confidential computation since then. And right now at Secret, I believe we are at the forefront of combining on-chain and off-chain privacy and doing super interesting things in general confidential compute.
Yeah, and I'm Lisa
Lisa.
Loud. I'm the executive director of the Secret Network Foundation. That's the ecosystem arm of Secret Network. So we work on everything to do with building with builders, grants, supporting the network in growing, marketing, etc. And my journey comes from big tech, Apple and PayPal, and got into the blockchain space in 2017. Have worked at some big projects like BitMEX and Shapeshift, and now have been leading the Secret Network Foundation for a couple of years. We are very much focused on the confidential aspect of AI and how adding confidentiality and encryption to what is already an amazingly great technology is going to make it accessible and usable for a larger section of the population and industry.
All righty then, Humayun, feel free to lead in with an introduction, potentially towards the secret crowd that might be tuning in.
Yeah, hi, Hamayan, the CEO and founder of Fetch.ai. We started in end of 2018. Previous background is from DeepMind. I was the first investor and the group of the first five that joined DeepMind was when it was founded. Um, we're doing some interesting stuff in Fetch. Our focus has been always on agentic systems because we think the application layer is going to be where the value is going to come from, and agents enable the application layer, and privacy plays a very, very important part in it because trying to get applications and keeping the data secure and private, perhaps in many cases where it's like, especially when there's banking or medical data involved. So we really are quite pleased to be partnering with Secret Labs to enable all of that. Because our focus has been building the infrastructure, and Secret's focus has been on the privacy and the security of the data, and executing and running AIs within those has been, hopefully a great journey till now. And I'm seeing quite a lot of future collaboration happening here.
Right, and I think it's just shedding a little bit of light on how we in Secret met. Me and Alex basically got each other on X. You were showcasing an MCP integration that they made at the time. I reached out. I noticed that generally speaking, the Secret ecosystem is dabbling in agents, and I pretty much approached him, telling him, "Hey, well, we've made this very friendly framework, very blockchain agnostic framework as well. Would you be interested in giving it a try?" And but I think that same week they had already started their agent, and we kickstarted efforts on initializing our agent in their confidential VM, and so that was kind of a massive success. And maybe Alex, feel free to kind of step in and shed light on those initial, what I call them, well, the learning curve that you and your team went through initially in setting up your agents in the VM.
Yeah, right. So it was really kind of a chance meeting on X that Nico initiated, and well, since then, yeah, we started learning about the U agents framework, And it's a big and interesting framework with agents running in a decentralized fashion, but being available on some sort of a marketplace where people can connect to them and query them. So it took us some time to understand the logic and the way the agents work. And then, even before that, like our deep conviction is that all of the AI agents or most of the AI agents must be running in a verifiable and confidential manner because as with any agent, people are sharing something of value. They're sharing some data, some information, whether it's their questions or their thoughts. They don't want it to be public, right? And they also don't want the agent code or the AI agent code to be compromised. They want to be sure that they're talking to something they think they are talking, right? And in this sense, what our technology, what the TE technology allows to do is it kind of turns any agent into a smart contract in a way. And by smart contract in this context, I mean something that is verifiable and immutable, something that you can trust without having to trust the person who actually is hosting it or running it. And so we started talking about this. We started talking about how we integrate U agents, how we make a proof of concept, or how we build a product where fetch agents or fetch agentverse agents can run inside TEs, and that's what we actually built. So we took a very simple agent that actually tells the prices of different stocks, the stock price agent. And we figured it's a great use case because while it's not doing something too sophisticated, but it is actually answering my questions about stocks, and I don't want anyone really to know which stocks I'm interested in. And also, the last thing I want is those prices to be manipulated by somebody. So that's what we started building, and we built it. And Nico, if it's a good time, I can make a very quick demonstration of
Sure.
the chain of trust. Okay,
That is perfect. Yeah, let's.
It's going to be a little bit technical, but I'll try to keep it quick for our audience, just to understand the depth of what we've been doing. So let me share this
Kind of perhaps
screen.
while you're getting your setup ready, just a little bit of context. So we have basically three components that chain each other together. You start off with the U-Agents framework, which is something we kickstarted development in back in late 2022, early 2023. And since then, we've gone to pass 100,000 downloads. The framework itself is very lightweight, but it caters to a kind of a growing body of audience because it's not overly technical. Python is very close to English itself, and so there aren't really a lot of blockers on kind of the language side. And then the framework itself is quite easy to pick up between the various examples we have, the very rich documentation, and the plethora of ways you can vibe code yourself into an agent. I think the getting started process is actually no longer a blocker. And then beyond that, agents created through the agent framework start off with an agent address and a wallet address, so they have native abilities to broadcast transactions across any chain, right? And what we tend to leverage blockchains for are financial execution layers. And so in that context, having a deployable web program that's able to broadcast transactions on your behalf natively, right? The minute you initialize the agent is incredibly useful. There's a little bit of a new method that's emerged wherein we kind of suspect that a lot of the financial activity, basically the intents that people have, financial intents, are going to end up in a lot of ways are going to be made quite easier and much more accessible with the advent of large language models, because you can basically speak any intent into existence, but the raw materials for that weren't quite there yet. And so this is where the next kind of component comes. This is the agentverse. Think of it as a port city for agents. It's where you can host your agents. And then about 4 months ago is when we launched ASI1, a large language model created by Fetch.ai, and you kind of see the chain establish itself. You have the large language model acting as a conversational UI. You have all of the agents hosted on Agentverse. This time in particular, they're about 2.6 million. And any agent that has kind of two specific protocols, really the agent chat protocol, is immediately accessible through ASI1. And so if you have a use case, it's a matter of about a day or two of really kind of understanding how it is to get started, hosting the agent on Agentverse, ensuring that the agent chat protocol is there, and your agent is now available to the 200,000 or so kind of Fetch.ai community members, and now with and Secret Networks agents are going to be available to anyone as well, right? And so that's there's a network flywheel here that we can kickstart. And I'll pause here, circle back to Alex to showcase kind of the attestation schema they use to ensure that verifiability is there while privacy is preserved, and then we can kind of pivot back.
Nico, I love what you said, Agentverse. That's a new term for me, but I love it. I think that's what we're entering into in the future is the Agentverse, right? We've had the metaverse, now it's time for the Agentverse. But as Alex goes into this demo, I just wanted to also mention that things move much more quickly these days, right? And we're at about 40 days in on our collaboration here, and this is where we've got to. It's kind of mind-blowing. We don't measure development time anymore in months or years. We measure it not even in weeks. It's kind of in days these days. So as you said, we can speak anything into existence. And I'm really excited to see this demo. I know it's a little technical, but it's really exciting to see how far we've come in such a short time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And Nico, I do confirm that actually for developers getting into UAgent, into the Agentverse framework, it's really very simple. It's a very simple framework where all the complexity is hidden away. And there is complexity there, but it's hidden away so that the developer does not really need to think about that. But let's go back to the demo. Again, quite technical. So right now, what we see here is an agent that we deployed on Agentverse. This is the Agentverse website, and this is our agent that is sitting right here. It's actually registered on Agentverse, but it is running on a machine that we created here. And you see, it's very technical. The agent, it has some APIs that people can interact with. And it's running on a computer called Fetchai and Secret agent at secretlabs.com. And this is its interface, right? Now, and this computer is actually a confidential virtual machine, a secret VM. So a confidential virtual machine is a virtual machine that is totally isolated from the owner of the hardware on which it's running. That's privacy. And it's verifiable, meaning you can prove, or I can prove, which code is running on this machine. And the way to prove it is through something called the attestation. So each one of confidential virtual machines can provide an attestation quotes. It's something that's signed by the special hardware that's running the thing, and that contains information about all the components of the virtual machine from the ground up, starting from the firmware and to the kernel and to the root file system and so on, up to the specific Docker Compose file that defines the workload that's running on the machine. And we'll focus just on that. We won't go through all the layers. You'll have to trust me on that. So when I receive the attestation quote, I can verify it. And by verifying, what we mean is we have a special tool that allows us to check specifically whether this attestation, which I already pasted for the demo, confirms that this particular Docker Compose file is running on the machine. And if I click verify, the system calculates all kinds of hashes and compares them. It extracts hashes from the attestation and compares them to expected values that would have resulted from this particular Docker Compose. And indeed, we can see that this is confirmed to be an authentic secret virtual machine, and it's running this specific Docker Compose. Now, if I change something, if I change the version here to 0.4 and I verify, so I get a different result. It still is the attestation still belongs to a virtual machine, but it is not running this particular workload. Okay, I just changed the version of the Docker image, right? And I can immediately see that it's not running what I think it is running. Now, the Docker image here, it's published on GitHub, right? We can see it right here. And on GitHub, you can validate, you can check the actual workflow that created this Docker image. And here is the actual workflow. that you can go into and see all the logs and see the hash of the image and so on. And you can actually see the tag of the code that this image was built from. So what we establish here is actually a chain of trust from a remote virtual machine through the Docker Compose file, through the Docker image published on GitHub, to the actual source code that created this Docker image. So in this sense, again, it's kind of like a smart contract. I can prove that the agent I'm talking to was built from this particular source code and not a single byte was changed or tampered with in the process. That's the story of verifiability and of attestation, and the fact that the virtual machine is genuine, as we've seen, that proves that it's running on, specifically in this case, on Intel TDX technology, which guarantees isolation and privacy from the owner of the hardware where the virtual machine is running. That's the demo. Hope it was not too technical and not too boring.
Amazing. I mean, I think the essence of it is that we can tell if something is genuinely running on a TEE or if it's been hacked, man in the middle, or any kind of hacking attack. And why is that important? Like, why do we care that the AI we're talking to, the agent we're talking to, is actually secured? Like, what are the things bad things that could happen here?
Well, that's a great question. All sorts of bad things. Like the simplest bad thing that can happen, that is already happening where we're talking to Claude and OpenAI and all the other guys, is that all we're saying is observed, processed, collected, and then used, not necessarily against us, but in a way to maybe to manipulate us or God knows what, right? That's the most obvious thing that we all are exposed to, except for those of us who are using confidential AI models like Secret AI, for instance. But there's more, right? Somebody could manipulate the answers. Somebody could give you wrong answers on purpose in order to make you behave in a certain way. That's especially dangerous if we're talking about financial decisions, right? I'm talking to an agent or using an agent that manages my portfolio. What if it has been tampered with and it starts managing my portfolio to benefit somebody other than myself? So these are just small examples. I'm sure Nico, Lisa, you have more of that. So
yes, much more. I think we can just take a look at. So any sufficiently high stakes use case necessitates privacy. Imagine you have a general practitioner medical model. It's obvious you'd want that to be a private conversation. Because otherwise, not only is it not private, but it's sitting in someone's computer somewhere, right? It's never the cloud, it's always someone else's computer. And so a very real, tangible use case demonstrating why there's value in kind of maintaining confidentiality by default. So that's one. On the verifiability bit, agents are deployable web programs. And so that source code changes all the time. And sometimes the changes are meaningful, but sometimes the changes are malicious. And in that context, you really want to be able to in a lot of ways, you're not going to be able to see the agent's code unless it is explicitly made open source. And that's a decision that the creators can choose. But if you have the attestation system working, then you can pretty much have a stamp of approval saying, yes, this is exactly what you need to expect from this source code. And then, so that's one. And then on top of that, you can also have the audit process in the exact same way that you would audit smart contracts. You can audit the agent's code, particularly impactful for enterprise use cases. But what you end up getting is the ability to not infer trust, but obtain trust, right? In kind of a very explicit way. So having private conversations, for example, with a medical model is very high impact and obvious value as well. And you can take that as a consequence of its high impact. You can kind of extrapolate from there, which is that any sufficiently impactful use case will require privacy, because it is simply in the nature of kind of impactful inventions, right? Yeah. And then compare and contrast that with non-private systems, your data lives there forever, Okay, and sure, they can use it to improve the model, which is, if that's something you're interested in, then you can also opt in, right, to having non-confidential conversations. If you want that, that's great. But that's it. I mean, your data lives there forever, and that is a we've kind of seen that early versions of that back in the 2012, 2017 process, when I think you can say that the attention economy was born there during that time. And what ended up happening, well, hey, here's a free platform. Oh, it's actually not free. We're actually mining your attention and kind of introducing these incredibly predatory designs designed to keep you here glued to the screen. And then about a year and a half later, you had kind of, well, now you're not only glued to the screen, now we've kind of learned what it is that triggers you. So here's a bunch of sensationalistic content specifically designed to trigger you in ways that only our AI model can design. And you can kind of extrapolate that more and more. And there's kind of a vile kind of bit there, which is that I'm not that impacted, right? I'm a 29-year-old man. I can detach myself from the screen. Who's most impacted are the younger kids who end up being the early adopters of these novel technologies, that end up being slightly careless or impulsive, or simply want to be part kind of the crew. And so you can see how kind of baking confidentiality and verifiability deals away with that entire business model. So there are technical benefits, but on the product side and industry wide, there's just a plethora, a basket of value that is well, waiting to be unlocked. And then the business models are wildly simple because,
Yeah.
hey, if this.
And just wanted to say something you said about that data being in the model forever. I just did a video about clever prompt engineering that can extract data that is inside the model. If a clever, it's, you don't even have to hack anything now. If you can query the model in a way that it gives up to you some of the data that was used to train it, if you have access to it, then you can actually find out some personal high stakes information about the people who gave their data to train the model. And so it's not even like, it's, yeah, it's there forever, and clever people can extract it from the model. So it is kind of scary when you think about the far-reaching effects of this change from search engine life, where we get all our information from searching, to agent life, where we get all our information from models, AGO as it's called, agent optimization, agent generated optimization. But anyway, it's like, it's the set of things that are high enough stakes to be worth hacking or getting into even gets higher because of AI's ability to crunch data and come out with insights. So even if you were flying under the radar before, you can't fly under the radar now because human attention is limited, but AI attention, it can go through every single line of all of your texts and find the one thing that you wish no one heard you say.
Yes, that is 100% true. And the prompt injection attack is really one of the many other attacks. Every new technology that arises is somewhat imperfect, particularly initially. This is actually true for AI agents themselves. And it's actually, and so there's kind of an industry shift towards recognizing that beyond web search and code AI agents, a lot of the use cases are gimmicky. And they're not sufficiently high impact. And then once you push into impact, then you're met with a wall of hurdles, a lot of which revolve around your ability to selectively disclose for enterprise-based use cases, and then a lot of which simply deal with storing, harnessing, and generally speaking, leveraging best practices whenever you're working with user data. And so one approach is just never keep the user data to begin with. And then the second approach is establish a chain of trust. In our case, the chain of trust is kind of slightly higher impact because agents are kind of, you can think of them as a form of embodied intelligence, right? They're not fully autonomous in that they don't set their own goals, but they are autonomous as measured with kind of the degree the degree of human oversight is going to be minimized as we move into the future. So you might give them a sufficiently complex goal, and they'll take that, break it down into a sequence of elementary tasks, and actually execute on them. And so what you're going to be obtaining isn't just conversations, it's not pictures. What you're actually obtaining is people's behavior, or in this case, the behavior of machines, because agents can also act as representatives of machines. And so there's kind of a twofold benefit here. Number one is that if you'd like to, let's just take the machine example, right? Trucks have a CAN module. That's the central processing unit of a truck. And that takes information from all the sensors and actuators and so forth and process it. You can embed an agent in that module, and you can tell the truck, find yourself a parking spot. Now, if you were to go to a kind of, let's say, a third-party logistics company with a fleet of 50 to 100 trucks, and you tell them everything your trucks do is now fully public, it is out there. Well, that kind of undermines a lot of their business models, because sometimes you end up transporting sand, but sometimes you end up transporting, for example, an internal combustion engine for a plane, right? Or you would have, there's a measure called specific gravity there, which is a combination of how heavy your cargo is and how expensive it is. And so if you're transporting light goods that are also very expensive, smartphones, tablets, other high-end gear, then that is you're going to want that to be fully private. And so, and finally, just our own community want private AI. My initial motivation was that as soon as we launched ASI 1, the first, maybe the third question, certainly within the top 5, was, is this private? Is it going to kind of, start extracting my data? And at the time we told people, well, yes, initially, but that's because it's a very novel invention. And so we need to store a little bit of your session data, anonymize it, but we basically need to ensure that it's running stably across various operating systems, various browsers, phones, tablets, and so forth. And then there's kind of a shared interest at Fetch.ai to effectively have a fully private interaction. And beyond, and that's not gimmicky, right? That is as high impact as it is, and also as foundational as it can be. And so I'll pause here.
Yeah, all those topics are just fascinating, and how those agents are taking over a lot of areas. Today I just read this story about people trying to fight the robo taxes, the Waymo taxes in LA, I think, and they try to stop them from parking in certain areas. And it's like really, well, it's not Skynet yet, but it is like a fight. So the agents do something that people don't always want them to do, and it's like such an amazing it's really an amazing time, an amazing technological space to be in. And yeah, the agents need to and think what happens if the code of those robo taxes is tampered with, right? Of course, those companies
Yes.
wouldn't let us even see the code, but if we could know that it was not tampered with, that would be a good step. Because what if somebody injects a bad code there, and then it starts taking me to Disneyland, although I don't want to go to Disneyland, or taking me off the cliff? So there's a lot to a lot to process there, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? We're just starting with all that.
It's very funny because when you mention Skynet was centralized and adversarial, and what we're doing is decentralized and for your benefit. And so, like, there's kind of a massive departure there on the technical side, but on the human interaction side, I'm a fan of the notion that the best use cases will come when people and AIs work harmonically. And so AIs are very analytical, certainly more analytical than humans, but they're not, for example, able to act on that intelligence. And agents are a great step in that direction, but they're certainly nowhere near humans' ability to embody intelligence. So that's one. And number two is that if you're able to, if you kind of assume that this system, the various AI systems, will be weaponized against you from the get-go, there's a natural incentive for you to distrust them, not just a specific company, but generally speaking, as a movement, as an industry. Compare and contrast that when if you see technology that's by default being made for your benefit, that's both giving you flexibility to opt in and out of privacy, both giving you flexibility to kind of allow it to act in varying degrees of autonomy on your behalf, that's a major builder of trust, right? That is a major builder of trust. And I think that it's really only a matter of time before we end up seeing a slight preference, and then from that slight preference emerges a trend, and then that trend would naturally favor systems that are effectively able to give you high impact insights while also preserving your basic fundamental rights, as opposed to leveraging high impact insights as a carrot, but the stick being that you're slowly kind of getting dragged into we kind of saw what happened with social media and various social and kind of generally speaking platforms like that. They started off as we're connecting the world and slowly grew into kind of basically glorified adware and spyware. And it's very easy to imagine that something like this, these kind of particular trends, different in the details, but globally speaking, can emerge in the AI realm. And so there's a clear differentiator here. So that's one. But number two is that AI agents are generally speaking about a year old. Yes, they existed before that. They're actually 50 years old. But in terms of viral spike in attention and global awareness, you can kind of just say, well, no, these systems aren't really, they're very novel. And so I find it amazing that let's say a year after virality, we've now picked apart and placed and kind of understood that high impact, extremely useful use cases necessitate privacy, particularly because of their ability to go wrong, but also because of their ability to kind of go incredibly right. So if you're doing something wrong, you're going to want privacy. You're not going to want to tell anyone. But if you're doing something right, in this case, medical models or breast cancer detection models, or kind of really any or financial models, right, then you're also going to want to ensure that the human leveraging that has what would I call it, kind of a natural incentive to trust the system that's born out of the properties of the system itself. And so, again, I'll pause here.
Yeah, it raises an interesting question because you mentioned the pace, the accelerated pace of development, and how we are in an age where, you know, this has been going on for 50 years, but now there's a spike in attention. And I've noticed, I mean, now I'm vibe coding, you know, and learning what the AI agents can and cannot do. And while they're impressive, they in my opinion, I don't see emerging consciousness from them. Agent comes from agency, and, you know, really what we're talking about, let's leave the word consciousness aside because it's a highly charged word, but let's ask if they truly have agency in the world, or if they're just set on a path and they're iterating on that path and they're improving on that path, but they don't truly have agency in the world as an autonomous human would have. And so I'm just curious, you work in this area very intensely, Nico, and I'm wondering what your opinion is on this.
It's very non-obvious to me whether humans have agency themselves. I mean, if Sigmund Freud proved something, it's that we're kind of the playthings of the gods. So let's just start off with humans there, right? But our behavior is driven by factors that are genetic and we're not aware of them. And so anytime we say subconscious, what we mean, like my temperature is currently being regulated now. I'm not consciously doing that. Yet if my temperature were to skyrocket, that would have an immediate impact on my mood, which would then have an immediate impact on my desire to do stuff. And so agency itself is a concept that I'm not going to pretend like I understand. On the technical side, there's two philosophical kind of approaches. If your agent is able to set its own goal, then you can basically call it autonomous. And if your agent is not able to set its own goal, then you can adopt basically Tesla's degrees of autonomy kind of framework, which is that, as long as the need for human manual intervention and oversight is minimal, then the agent is autonomous. Now, that's a little bit of a wordplay. Actual autonomy comes from being able to set your own goal. The current instance of the U-agent framework doesn't focus on that, because fine, let's bake that ability in. There's actually a very interesting additional framework as part of the wider ASI alliance called Iris. It's kind of, what would I call it? So there's a developer called Barrett Cook who created a system which allows an AI agent to map out the real any digital world. Right, we started off with digital world, and so it started off with turn-based games like Hero 3, for example, and then it went into Minecraft with a single kind of just initial spark of entropy. Be curious, not even one word, explore. that agent would start mapping out that digital world, building an internal world model as a consequence of all of its interactions. And then at some point, that internal world model would be sufficiently advanced to allow it to set its own goal. Because a game like Minecraft has a goal. And there are objectives, there are win conditions. It's effectively like a resource-based game as well. And so a lot of the economics, the internal game mechanics mimic the real world quite well. That agent, if you just gave it time to explore, would reach its own conclusions, set its own goals, set its own sub goals, and a lot of this comes from the fact that it's kind of effectively able to build these first of all map the world, then build these internal world models, and then from that it's able to orient itself, which is what we usually kind of think when we think agency. And so and I think that kind of that's the top level overview there. In terms of systems that work harmonically with AI, I would generally prefer, at least for the time being, that we are put in a position where we are the driver of the agency. And that it's very unobvious to me. It's not obvious what sort of goals an AI would set. I'm not going to blow this out of proportion and say that, well, if the paper, the misalignment problem, I'm not going to dive into that. What I'll say is that it's very, as I see these various reinforcement-based techniques kind of emerge, a lot of the goals they set are just experimental. It's just a waste of resources, right? And so, sure, it might not set a grand goal. It might set kind of just an arbitrary goal, but a lot of the goals that we have are not arbitrary. They're humans is what I mean. They're very targeted, and sometimes they're very charged emotionally, and sometimes they're noble, and sometimes they're not. But our ability to course correct and adapt is, for the time being, the leading candidate to. And so what you can kind of see emerging is a pattern, which is let's leverage the AI for incredibly data-rich analytical environments, but let's hone it in. And in honing it in, it's not a maintenance of control. You can think of it as kind of our superpower is the ability to adapt, and its superpower is the ability to crunch exceedingly exceptional amounts of data.
Right.
And optimize.
And optimize and kind of
optimize
pattern
towards a certain objective of cost function. Yeah.
Yes, but it's not obvious. So yes, you can have a certain objective function that you're seeking for. Those change all the time. Our own motives are incredibly
for
dense.
humans, right?
For humans,
they
yes.
change. I think,
Yeah.
and this is like there. I think there is still a huge difference, coming back to Lisa's questions, between the human agency, which is I want to do this, I'm interested in that, I'm suddenly excited about that thing, versus an agents that will probably get there at some point. Which don't. I mean, it's hard to even discuss now what they will be excited about. Can they be even excited? But I think for now, what we're seeing is more of the agents that are following some objective functions. Okay, let's maximize this or minimize that, or get the cheapest way to get from A to B. In this, they're very good, but I'm sure lots of people in our space are working on making the agents want things, or getting interested in things. And that's where it becomes like uncharted territory, because right,
Yes.
as you said, what will they want?
Yes.
If they learn to want or desire.
We are quickly headed towards narrow AI versus models and agents that are able to generalize. And that is not something I will pretend like I understand. I'm simply not quite there yet. And so I just approach it from a humble perspective. But what I do think is increasingly valuable is if we're able to direct the agents, then harmony naturally emerges, because we're going to leverage this technology in the same way that we leverage telephones, which is an extension of our own ability to stay connected. And then agents are basically going to be an extension of our own ability to stay informed, to work with actionable insight as a consequence of models' ability to kind of either anomaly detect or predict, and then to The agents themselves will act as a form of embodied intelligence, making presentations, helping us write code, making trucks park themselves, and so forth. And then sufficiently advanced agents, kind of such as the example I threw in earlier, general practitioner models, are then going to really help us improve ourselves. And I think that that's a very viable path. Us improving ourselves, and then we improving the AI, but maintaining that harmonic bond seems to me like a middle ground, which is incredibly mutually beneficial. And we leverage each other's mutual strengths, our ability to adapt, which adapt is an incredibly, you can think of it as just a general umbrella term, but our ability to pay attention, to stay informed, to maintain relevance, to anchor responses in honesty, and generally speaking, to work with any sort of form of goal direction, and agents' ability, or AI models wrapped in agents' ability to supercharge that, supercharge our own skill set, supercharge our own ability to get shit done, for lack of a better word, is where a lot of the tangible value is.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're many years away from. I think we kind of had a rush of euphoria when the agents came out. And we were thinking maybe a lot of people were thinking, oh, we're this close to, AI taking over the world and having its own consciousness. And I think we're pretty far away from that. I wouldn't be qualified to estimate years because the pace of acceleration of innovation is always increasing. But I do think we're a lot farther away from it than we thought we were. Just like, quantum, we're a lot farther away from quantum computing being anything we need to worry
Yeah.
about for the short term. So it's
Yeah.
just, I feel like that message needs to get out there. There's danger in AI, but it's mostly the danger of being manipulated, just like the
Any other
examples you
technology.
mentioned, like social media, search engine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right.
I fully agree with that.
Right. I think as long as AI doesn't have something equivalent to like the Maslow pyramid of us humans who want first, safety and then friendship and then you know, self promotion and then greatness in a way. And that's why we're seeing humans trying to achieve things and trying to win whatever games or situations we are playing, and then all kinds of emotions. We are very complex, and still, I think as
Yeah.
humans, we're way, way, way more complex than the AI models, and they don't have some overarching goals. They don't have a desire to grow and become more something than what they are, and we do in whatever we do. Usually with humans, we want to become better, to win, to reach some achievements. AI agents right now, at least I haven't seen any of them trying to do that. And once, but yeah, that would be interesting. That would be
I
really
think
interesting
Nico,
when they do start, feeling that, when they start competing, and when they
I think Nico
start.
would say that those wants maybe are biologically driven, but it's an interesting concept.
Right.
I have no idea. Oh my God. If I knew what motivates me intrinsically on the genetic level, that is the closest thing to a superpower there is. Monks
Yeah.
spend years in that. And what I can tell you is that I'm learning about the brain a lot, and about 50% of the neurons in the brain are inhibitory neurons. And so our brain functions by diminishing, kind of by allowing us to hone in, right? And so there's clarity in reducing away, and so I think that that is why we're able to act, because otherwise you're kind of stuck in an endless loop of analysis. Am I searching for the best outcome? That's certainly a danger there. So that's number one. And then number two is that humans are transient and temporal by default, and so whatever motivates us is probably much more emotional as opposed to kind of rational. And so rationality itself might be just kind of not quite there yet. There's certainly a lot for us to evolve. What I do believe is that there's conflicts. So in our own mind, we're kind of a system that's inherently conflicting, and in permanent conflict. And so sometimes I'm hungry, but I need to work is an example of that. Or sometimes, it's pretty cold outside, and so I want to turn on my heating, but I don't really have the money to pay that right now. And so these continuous trade-offs is kind of what we make, and out of that, we get anti-fragility. And so, as individuals, we live in constant conflict, continuously having to work with imperfect information, reducing away everything that doesn't matter so that we can hone it. And we are incredibly resource constrained, and yet we make it work. Compare and contrast that with existing AI systems, which have billions of dollars of compute and energy and data thrown at them, and yet they're not quite there in terms of adaptability. So, just kind of recapping an initial point, which is I genuinely do not know if we know the human brain enough to be able to adequately estimate our own prowess. And then if we're going to benchmark AI models with ourselves, sure, I think it's very easy to arrive at conclusions. And I think that upon a lot of the benchmarks that I see kind of break when you can really scrutinize them, for example. And so on the one hand, we don't understand ourselves quite well enough to be able to benchmark against ourselves, right? And two is that let's just take large language models because they're the meta. Um, you can recombine and permutate within the knowledge, but it's very difficult to come up with new knowledge. And so a system that is trained on every data point we've ever generated would be exceptionally versed at taking a look at every data point we've ever generated, but there's no net new intelligence in a way there. And so I think that's the next frontier. We don't just combine and permutate from our memories and from what we've read in the past. There's a kind of a creative bit, our ability to kind of really leverage the scientific method, and in that exploration process, obtain clarity, right? Have a structured approach. But then at some point, there's something about humans that I don't think we've documented quite well. And so pivoting into are we able to create these systems that are going to direct themselves? Probably, but if they're sufficiently advanced, it's highly likely that they're also going to live in a state of conflict, right? They're also going to live in a state of flux because they're again going to have to make these same trade-offs, the same decisions. And so in a way, both humans and AI are probably going to trend towards some form of anti-fragility, right? Systems that actively benefit from chaos. And so that's, I think, an incredibly hopeful thing. And it is also an incredibly speculative thing on my end. But circling back, just kind of being mindful of and maybe just pivoting into a brand new topic, I suppose, leaving kind of the esoteric side aside. I'm so happy to see Cosmos ecosystem projects finally orchestrating between each other. I've been monitoring Secret for a while now, and probably for about 6 months, maybe in a year. And I saw that you're really making headway, especially in the past, whenever you rebranded and kind of really honed in on the AI meta. I saw that as a massive win because you guys are an incredibly infrastructure heavy project, and we are an incredibly application heavy project because it's very easy for you to not make a web app, to not make a mobile app, to simply make an agent hosted on Agentverse, and you kind of not a lot of overhead there. It's very approachable, very adaptable, all of which is kind of centralized in this kind of very elegant, or maybe not centralized is the wrong word, but consolidated in this elegant UI, ASI1.ai, Secret Networks agent, Fetch.ai's agent, some random indie developers agent, any other partner that we have, say Cosmos Hub's agent, and so forth. And all of these agents, generally speaking, represent people, places, and product. And in that context, I love that. I love that the kind of sovereign chains, sovereign app chains, leveraging each other's strengths. You guys being incredible at the kind of trusted execution environments and your ability to attest that a program is indeed verifiable, and on our end, being able to just speak a program into existence. If you open up ASI1 now and you just gave it a sufficiently advanced prompt, it will probably create an agent that might not work initially, might need a little bit of tweaking, coding, debugging, but you can damn near speak any program into existence. And so we're kind of, I see this a very elegant solution to the cold start problem that chains tend to have, which is that, well, you have this infrastructure and service of applications. Where are the applications? Well, typically projects would have to do all of that by default, but not in Cosmos. We can just partner and in 40 days have that. I see that as epic, and it's just.
Yeah, the interoperability in Cosmos is really incredible. It does,
incredibly
as
heartwarming.
you said. Oh, sorry, you cut out, Nico, there for a second. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but
apologies.
yeah, a lot of stuff is a lot easier in the Cosmos ecosystem, and I agree with you. It's great to see that technology wise, it's really superior in a lot of ways. And just I think the Cosmos ecosystem has gone through a lot of changes and challenges, but um, technologically wise, it's so much easier to build on.
I
Yeah,
agree.
somebody put it, how was that? Ethereum is for, I think it was for philosophers, Solana for engineers, and Cosmos for tinkerers.
Tinkerers
Because
might
it's just
be.
so easy to put things together. And I think tinkerers have huge place in making humanity progress because we and I think being in this ecosystem we kind of become tinkers and I am kind of a tinkerer myself. So yeah, you take small things, you put them together, and another interesting things come out, and then another one, and then another one, and then from this chaos, some big things and
Yeah.
beautiful things are born.
Uh, there's something poetic that you'd say that because you were actually tinkering with MCPs when I met you, and so there seems to
Exactly,
be
exactly.
yes,
That is
exactly.
the thing.
Uh,
We were doing
and,
exactly this. We're tinkering. Let's try
and
this. Let's play with that. Oh, it works. Okay, nice. Oh, this doesn't work. Okay, let's move to somebody. Let's put those two together. Let's see. It works. Okay, nice. Let's play more. So yeah, exactly. And this can lead, like the process of tinkering. It does not necessarily have a goal, a very clear goal. Like okay, let's play and in some cases, very interesting things come out that you would not even expect in the beginning.
I love that, and there seems to be a little bit of a cultural aspect. So there's no real conflict between us. I think when we initially had that meeting, it was obvious to me that you guys are infrastructure heavy, and that I'd love to leverage that because just leveraging your trusted execution environments, and then being able to kind of have a Docker compose file, then establishing that chain of trust, and then Fetch.ai comes across and well, here we go with these incredibly easy to make programs, and now let's go ahead and kind of start brainstorming use cases, and then use cases arrived on the spot. So we've pushed past the demo, we saw it's possible, and then what we're exploring right now, and maybe Alex, feel free to kind of shed light on some of the future directions that we're
Yeah,
exploring right
sure,
now.
sure, sure. So again, I think we have a very clear direction. We're still tinkering. So right
Yeah,
now we are playing with a very exciting, well, very interesting and serious medical imaging model developed by Fetch, right? And we're now working to create a service which is protected by Secret VM, which is confidential and verifiable, where people can send their medical images for analysis and get signed and verifiably signed results. This particular model is for breast cancer. Very serious, very serious question and area, saving people's lives. So we're very excited about this, and it's also a lot of responsibility working on that. And it's going pretty well. And then I think the next step is actually seeing how we put ASI into a verifiable environment so that users can trust it even more and
yeah,
verify it all the way down. And then, as I already mentioned, we're working on templates for Fetch.ai developers so that they can create agents that are built out of the box in such a way that can be easily deployed in secret VMs, preferably with just one click, or as
yeah.
part of their CI/CD constant integration, constant development workflows, where you just create an agent and it's automatically deployed and starts running in a secret VM. And I'm sure there will be more possibilities. We're just beginning. As you said, it's been just 40 days, and yeah, the sky
I
is
love that.
definitely the limit. Maybe not even the sky.
I love the fact that you were able to pick up on the agent so fast. It was quite obvious to you that there's value to be had here, and then I also love the fact that we're kind of maintaining an open mind. There's really no shortage of use cases because AI is like electricity, right? It's general purpose technology, and so you can use electricity to power your light exactly as I did right now, or you can use electricity to kind of heat up water. and it's not obvious what the best use case is, but we are in a position where we can simply understand what it is that the market wants and engineer to order use cases for that. And in that context, I think that the applications populating infrastructure in service of applications is really kind of going to become kind of a full circle closed loop system where either a company or a community member or anyone else really just wants to set up an agent to solve a specific problem or task. And if privacy and verifiability are effectively necessities, then well, here you go, here's a template, and I don't know where to start. Well, you have this large language model capable of teaching you everything, because programming is actually just syntax and sending commands to kind of hardware component, and this machine and programming languages are languages, right? And so large language models are perfectly capable of and so what I'm pointing at is that there might be a Cambrian explosion of utility happening here, and that a lot of this utility is informed by the market. It's not a guesstimate. We can actually do the research, figure out what the pain points are, approach the companies or individuals and tell them, well, here's a competitor if you don't like the existing kind of landscape, or here's a brand new product if you feel like nothing out there kind of really suits your needs. In the medical, in the legal, in the financial domains, I think are high impact precisely because of the fact they're high impact, right? And so anytime you've got a lot of money involved, that tends to be a high stakes, high impact decision for people. Models excel at giving you clarity of perception, particularly within these high stakes, data rich environments. Agents excel at being able to abstract a lot of the complexity, right? Embody, so basically execute the intents on your behalf. You don't need to learn how to click stuff. You don't need to. So that's one of the values. Just abstracting complexity away is one. And then you kind of have this ability to just speak practically any financial intent into existence. Mm-hmm. So if you'd like to buy a house, if you'd like to save for a truck, if you'd like to set up an enterprise, well, there's a lot of kind of complexity there. You can leverage various models to inform you, and you can leverage various agents to execute on your behalf. And you are therefore an orchestrator, and you see the harmonic bond you're directing with the various.
Yeah, I think coding has always been for me a very creative endeavor. It's speaking things into being with language. Only then other people can use them, and to me, it's just a step forward to shorten that distance between conception and realization. So I'm really excited about where we are, and you have some really deep thoughts. Thank you for sharing them.
Thank you as well, but also some very practical thoughts.
Yes,
very practical. Yeah. It doesn't have to be deep, and I do not know where this goes. That's why I love it. It's very difficult to chart a roadmap given the variance, and I love that. I love the fact that we can just have insight into the proximal future, but very difficult to see into the deep future, right? But our ability to adapt and kind of effectively push for a balance between impact and utility and value, allowing our communities to inform us, allowing the market to inform us, really positions us as kind of the type of partnership that can stand its own weight, it's able to carry itself forward. And what else do you want?
I would add here, Nico, I think we are also shaping this future in a way. Yes. Right? We are part of this community that is building AI, that is building agent, that is building infrastructure that influences this. So yes, we don't know where it will end up, where it's going exactly, but all the things we're doing are actually pushing this into a certain direction, together with thousands or hundreds of thousands of other people who are pushing in different directions. But we're not just observers here. That's what I wanted to say. We are not just observers in this AI, new AI world. We are part of the force that is driving it.
Somewhere.
Yeah, we don't know where yet.
I think it's clear from this discussion that all three of us are very excited to be part of that movement, that wave, and contributing to. I can't imagine not being part of this exciting time.
Most certainly, I love it. I'm very grateful as well. We in the past conversation, I shared a little bit of I call it a little bit of a consideration. I was like, well, you have so many ideas, but there's only so little engineering resources, and kind of at Fetch, everyone's pretty much honed in on kind of specific deliverables. And then Alex was like, no, we'll handle it. We were going to handle it. This is what we're gonna do, and this is what we're currently done. And it's really there's an adventurous, lighthearted spirit that's underpinned by kind of an informed, adventurous, lighthearted spirit. And so I see incredible value. But I also see incredible adventure. There's an emotional pull towards creating these technologies, and I think that contributes to the process immensely. And I'm really looking forward to more updates. And if any other Cosmos ecosystem projects want to tune in, leverage Secret's trusted execution environments, leverage our stuff, and bring something into the table, and we can kind of really get this interchain party started that is both informed, right, and yet adventurous. And in that context, I see it as a relationship that starts between us, but then might potentially emerge kind of from one to many to many to many, right? We're various kind of a true hub and stake in a sense, a true hub and stake model, a hub and spoke model. Apologies. And so in that context, there's just a lot of variance when you try and imagine how these technologies interplay and move forward into the future.
Yeah.
And that's certainly exciting.
It is, for sure.
Well
It's
said.
great to get to know you a little better.
Thank you. It's a pleasure's all mine. It's great to get to know you guys a little better as well.
Looking forward to
Me and
it.
Alex, we've had a bunch of these conversations, and towards the end, we're always just smiling and kind of very charged.
Yeah, because it's
love
it's a
it.
lot to process, and it's a lot of like good information, good energy, good vibes, and that's why it's so much fun, and that's why it's worth it.
Yeah, cool.
I love it. I think this we're kind of reaching towards the end. There's we didn't really have a questions time, kind of QA time, but maybe in the future we shall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alex, Lisa, it was a pleasure, and thank you for your time. And looking forward
Thank
to
you.
the next
Thank you,
podcast.
Nico.
Thank
Great
you.
stuff.
Thank you. Look forward to see
So
what we're
remember
doing
not
next.
to leave this tab.
Oh yes, that is right.